1,000 days sober, haven't had a sip of alcohol, no marijuana, no substances whatsoever for 1,000 days. A huge accomplishment for me, and I just wanted to share why I decided to make the change, what I learned, hindsight, and maybe some advice for someone that's just struggling with addiction. So my vices, mainly, it was marijuana. I used to really like marijuana, and it wasn't like crazy detrimental to my life. It didn't like have a huge negative impact on me, but I was impaired, and I didn't have a clarity of my vision. And having hindsight now of being sober for 1,000 days, I could see that I was impaired, and it did have a really big effect on the way I interacted with people. I was giving people a halfway watered down version of myself, and I was high, and I always was seeking to go get high. And if it wasn't marijuana, it would sound like a drug addict. If I was like, oh man, I can't wait to go get high. And when you have hindsight, I'm not saying that everyone should stop smoking weed. People like it for medical reasons. People just like it in general. But for me, when I was doing it, I would have a deep sense of regret after, and I knew that I should stop. And eventually I just listened to that voice. There was a lot of times where I would stop, but then I'd pick it back up again. I wasn't really serious about just stopping completely. And once I did get serious about stopping completely, that's when it really changed. It wasn't a 30-day time period of being sober and then relapsing. It was like, nah, I'm done with this. I'm not going back to this. And that was what really changed, was when I was like, I didn't give myself a time frame where I was like, I'm going to stop for 30 days and that was it. It was more like, I'm not doing this no more. Like, that's it. And alcohol wasn't that bad for me. I didn't really like alcohol like that, but I would still socially drink, and I would regret it after. And I kind of just use regret as my guideline as to what not to do. Anytime that I would feel regret for something, I would listen to that, and I just wouldn't do that anymore. And I knew my best version of myself didn't have a crutch. He didn't get high. He was more disciplined. And I decided to lean more into that person that I admired. And I knew that person that I admired didn't have all these addictions. So I decided to drop them. Not only for me, but for my people. I wanted to be my best self for everyone that I was around. I work with a lot of people, and every time that I would interact with them, it would just be some halfway watered down version of myself. So that's when I really wanted to switch, is when I started thinking about other people and not just me. I had like a bigger purpose than just getting sober. It was like, nah, I want to give my best self to my people, and I don't want to give them some halfway version of myself. I don't know why anybody would. So once I had a bigger reason to quit is when I actually found success in quitting. And then momentum plays a huge role in which direction you go in. It's hard to try to get sober when you've been creating a lot of momentum in the opposite direction. And once you started getting some traction in staying sober, it became a lot easier. And once you got rid of things that didn't serve you anymore, it made room for things that are more productive, more healthier. And then you could actually stick with it because there was a lot more room for these healthier habits. And you wouldn't self-sabotage. Once you gain some momentum in a positive direction, a lot of times we self-sabotage with these negative habits. And once you just cut out the negative habits completely, you stop self-sabotaging. So then you create more momentum in the positive direction, and it just becomes easier. It becomes easier to just stay in that groove. You get in a positive groove instead of that negative rut that addiction and vices can lead to. And maybe some advice that I would give someone that's trying to struggle with addiction is just know that when you think about a purpose that's bigger than just, I want to feel better, when you think that, hey, I need to give my people the best version of myself, and it doesn't include all these vices, all these negative habits, it gives you a bigger reason to quit. And once you have a bigger reason to quit, it's easier. So if you have addiction, just try to find a bigger reason and don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution. And some hindsight of the things that I learned is you don't need all that stuff to just escape. a lot of times we're escaping our feelings. And once you sit down with your feelings and understand why the reason you're even using substances in the first place, then you can kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on with your feelings and why you're consuming these things. And for me, alcohol was just a social thing. It wasn't like I was trying to drown pain or nothing. I mean, I've gone through some really tough times in my life. I've lost my brother, and I didn't like run to these negative habits, but I still smoked weed. And the thing is like maybe I was like drowning out some of these negative feelings with substances, just slowly, so you wouldn't think so deeply about these tough subjects. But once you sit down with them, you understand them, you understand yourself and why you're even consuming them. You understand that a lot of times if you do have an addiction, you have an addictive personality. And if you can flip that addiction to like positive self-development, if you become addicted to these things, you can be a really powerful person. People that have addictions can make a really powerful impact on other people by pursuing these other types of addiction that are just more healthier, more positive, more better for your people. But 1,000 days sober, super proud of it. I wanted to share. And if you're struggling with addiction, just know that you have to have a bigger purpose besides your small problems, and focus more on the solution rather than the problem.